Atlanta shone with lights behind the panoramic glass like diamonds scattered on black velvet. But the most expensive trophy in this room in Nia, Opinion stood before the mirror, adjusting Cartier cufflinks. A thick, intoxicating aroma of oud and expensive tobacco hung in the penthouse Damon signature scent that always made Nia head spin. Nia adjusted the belt of her silk robe, her natural curls bouncing softly with every step. She watched her wife with adoration. Damon was the embodiment of stud excellence, a flawless beige bespoke suit, a fresh, perfectly shaved fade, and that special calm masculinity that made everyone around straighten their backs. Just a couple more signatures for the trust. Baby girl Damon voice was low velvety, but there was no warmth in it, only the usual business dominance. Nia picked up the heavy fountain pen. She did not even skim the text. Why this is Damon? Her protector, her king. With her left hand, Nia unconsciously touched the pocket where the positive pregnancy test lay, the perfect anniversary surprise, the last brick in their flawless empire. Suddenly, Damon's phone buzzed aggressively on the cold marble counter. The screen lit up the gloom for a second. Accountant. Nia frowned at 9 in the evening. On their anniversary day, Damon rejected the call instantly. Her jaw tightened and something hard, predatory flashed in her eyes. Business never sleeps, you know, she threw out, not meeting Nia. Gaze, she smiled, but the smile did not reach her eyes. And in this luxurious silence, under the sounds of soft jazz from vinyl, Nia felt a sticky chill run down her back, for the first time having nothing to do with the air conditioner. Everything in this house smelled of money and success, but beneath the aroma of expensive perfume, Nia caught a barely perceptible putrid smell of someone else's secret. The air in the boutique smelled of starched linen and exclusivity, but Keisha burst into this space like a hurricane. She did not just walk, she announced herself with the jingle of gold beam around me, bracelets, and the clatter of high heels. Friend, listen to me. Keisha's voice dropped to that conspiratorial whisper that used to seem like a sign of closeness to Nia, but now for some reason suffocated her. Damon is just trying to protect your legacy. These taxes will eat you alive. Sign over the assets and be done with it. You are a team, right? Ride or die. Keisha, long neon, yellow acrylic nails tapped rhythmically on Nia Platinum credit card, lying on the glass counter. Click, 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 like a countdown. Nia sighed wearily, trying to drive away the nocturnal doubts. I suppose you are right. Not having time to finish, Keisha reached out to her, but not to hug, her fingers greedily. Touched the diamond choker on Nia's neck. Let me try it on. For a second, Keisha did not ask, she demanded. Standing before the mirror, she struck a pose admiring herself in someone else. Diamond, she looked at her reflection, not like a friend, but like a hungry predator assessing a piece of meat. While Nia went into the fitting room, the mask of the caring sister instantly slipped from Keisha's face. She turned away and brought the phone to her lips. Yes, she whispered into the receiver, and her eyes became dead. Tonight, this bitch suspects nothing. Keisha smiled at Nia, reflection in the mirror, and there were too many teeth in that smile for friendly support. The lights of Atlanta dissolved in the rearview mirror, giving way to the stifling darkness of the highway. Rain began to drum on the roof of the Range Rover, like thousands of tiny fingers demanding to be let inside. The air conditioner in the cabin was working at full power, and Nia chilled, rubbed her shoulders, feeling an unnatural cold creeping under her skin. The playlist changed abruptly. The soft, enveloping R&B track cut off, and the cabin was filled with aggressive, heavy trap. Bass vibrated in the leather seats, resonating in teeth. Damon gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turned white. She did not look at Nia. She looked only at the road, nervously and harshly tapping out the rhythm with her fingers on the leather steering wheel cover from the back seat like a snake. Keisha leaned forward. Everything good? Situation under control, she asked, shouting over the beat. Rock solid, clean drop. Damon threw out shortly. They spoke in slang that Nia heard on the streets. But here in the enclosed space, these words sounded like a code, like a sentence, the meaning of which eluded her. Nia touched the pocket where the test lay. She needed to break this suffocating, sticky tension. Baby, she began, her voice treacherously trembled. I have a surprise. We're going to be shut up. Damon barked, not turning her head. There was no love in her voice, only steel. The car swerved sharply from the asphalt onto a washed-out dirt road. Branches whipped against the expensive paint like lashes. The light of xenon headlights cut through the wall of rain and snatched out ahead not a cozy cottage for a picnic, but a dense thicket and two dirty shovels leaning against an old oak. The heavy beat rocked the car, drowning out the beating of Nia's heart, which was now screaming only one thing to her: run. The rain turned the forest clearing into a black swamp. Nia stood on her knees, liquid mud soaking her light silk trousers, cold chilling to the bone. The blinding light of xenon headlights burned her eyes, turning Damon and Keisha into ominous, elongated silhouettes. Damon stepped forward. Her exclusive collectible Jordans were sinking in the dirty sludge, a surreal, sickening picture of luxury amidst a slaughter. In her hands was not a rose, but a rusty shovel. Damon, please, Nia screamed, drowning out the noise of the downpour, her voice breaking into a shriek. With a trembling hand, she snatched the white plastic test from her pocket. I am pregnant. Look, this is our child. Damon froze. The shovel in her hands trembled and lowered an inch. For a split second, the impenetrable mask of a gangster cracked, and fear flashed in her eyes. Maybe even a shadow of humanity. Do not dare, bitch. Do not fall for this. Keisha's shriek cut the air. She jumped up to Damon, digging her claws into her shoulder. She is lying. Do it now, or we lose everything. Money, Damon. Remember the money. Damon's face turned to stone again. Pity vanished, giving way to icy calculation. She gripped the handle more comfortably and walked up close, towering over her wife like an executioner. Sorry, baby girl, she whispered, and this affectionate, intimate nickname, which used to sound like a prayer, now sounded like a dirty curse. But business is business. The swing was sharp, short, and brutal. The last thing Nia saw was the face of the woman she worshipped, distorted by an ugly grimace of greed, and the cold glint of metal flying straight at her temple. The world exploded with a blinding red flash, and then came absolute, viscous darkness. The darkness was not empty, it was heavy. The first thing that returned was sound, a dull, rhythmic thud. Boom, 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 like the earth heart beating right in her ears. Nia opened her eyes but saw nothing. Only blackness and rare flashes of lightning somewhere incredibly far away, obscured by falling shadows. Something wet and cold flopped onto her cheek, then onto her forehead, plastering her eyes shut. Earth damp, sticky smelling of rot and roots. She tried to inhale, but her chest was compressed as if an elephant were sitting on it. She tried to scream, but her mouth instantly filled with mud. The taste of iron and sand on her tongue. She could not move. Paralyzed, buried from above, as if from another world came voices. They were distorted but painfully familiar. Faster. Your kicks are already covered in shit. Keisha's voice rang with hysteria and adrenaline. As soon as we get the insurance, I will buy you 10 pairs like that. And that villa in Tulum, shut up and dig. Damon growled, heavy breathing, and the grating of metal on stones could be heard. The trust passes to me 24 hours after confirmation of death. We are rich, baby, Keisha laughed. It was not the laugh of a human. It was the sound of a hyena tearing apart prey. Irvis' high-pitched, insane cackle. Rich, we are fucking rich. Goodbye, princess. Nia heard every word, every number they were dividing. They were bargaining for her life while she was still breathing. Terror, icy and primal, shackled her insides, but anger. Anger began to smolder somewhere deeper. The earth was heavy, wet, and smelled of oblivion. But the voices above stung more painfully than the lack of air. The last clod fell, cutting her off from the world of the living, leaving her alone with the darkness and the truth. The Range Rover engine roared, tearing the silence of the forest like a predator, leaving the scene of a feast. Tires spun in the mud, throwing clumps of earth toward the fresh mound under which Nia remained lying. Inside the cabin reigned an atmosphere of wild, almost animalistic euphoria. The adrenaline of murder mixed with the intoxicating anticipation of millions. Crank up the music, Keisha yelled, leaning back in the seat and propping her dirty heels on the dashboard. I need something hard. She hit the touch panel and the cabin exploded with Megan. The stallion beats Real Hot Girl, shit an anthem of confidence and power, which now sounded like a soundtrack to a crime. Keisha started twerking, right on the seat, waving her hands as if they had just hit the jackpot in Vegas and not buried a person alive. We did it, bitch. We are the queens of this city, she screamed, drowning out the bass. Damon, gripping the steering wheel, also began to bob her head to the beat. A crooked, triumphant smirk appeared on her face. They were so drunk on their impunity, so consumed by their ratchet celebration, that they did not notice one small detail. On the windshield hidden behind the rearview mirror, a tiny red light pulsed rhythmically. Blink, blink, blink. The dash cam, which Damon forgot to turn off in the turmoil, continued to dispassionately record reality. It recorded everything: their faces distorted by greed, their voices discussing the division of the inheritance, and even the coordinates of that Virum. Clearing the car disappeared around the bend, taking the murderers to their new rich life. They thought they had buried their sins deep in the damp earth, but the little red light on the windshield stared unblinkingly after them, saving the truth in the cloud, which a shovel could not dig up. The forest plunged into silence, broken only by the noise of the rain, washing away the traces of the crime. But the peace did not last long. A massive shadow emerged from the thicket, a huge Rottweiler whose muscles rolled under wet black fur. The dog froze, sniffing. The smell of blood and fear was stronger than the smell of ozone. With a low growl, the beast rushed to the fresh mound and began to furiously dig. Clumps of earth flew in all directions. Brutus. To me, the hoarse voice of an old man cut through the noise of the rain. Elijah, a tall old man with skin the color of ebony and eyes that had seen too much, walked out into the clearing. But the dog did not listen. He gnawed into the earth until his teeth closed on something that was not a root, on fabric. Elijah walked closer and froze. A hand stuck out of the mud, thin, graceful, with broken nails. "Lord have mercy," he whispered, falling to his knees. His old hands, accustomed to an axe, worked with incredible speed, raking away the wet clay. When he freed the head, the girl's body jerked convulsively. The mouth opened, spitting out black sludge. Air rushed into her lungs like broken glass, the most painful and sweet breath of her life. She wheezed greedily, swallowing the rain. Elijah shone the flashlight in her face and involuntarily recoiled, crossing himself. "Good God," he exhaled. Where there should have been beauty was a bloody mess. The blow with the shovel did not kill her, but it took her face. Elijah felt the cold gaze of the forest spirits on his back. This was not just a rescue. The ancestors returned her from the other world. But why? He scooped her up in his arms, light as a broken doll, and Brutus, whining, walked alongside, guarding what they had taken from him. Death inside the cabin, the air was thick and heavy. It was a sharp, intoxicating cocktail of smells: dried medicinal herbs, smoke from the hearth, and the sharp chemical spirit of cheap antiseptic shadows from the fire danced on the log walls like restless spirits come to look at the one who returned from the other world. Elijah worked with the precision of a military medic who had been through Vietnam. His hands rough as the bark of an old oak, stitched torn wounds and treated abrasions without unnecessary sentimentality. Nia tossed in fever, her consciousness melting, but the most terrible pain was not in her shattered face. She felt life leaving her body in hot, sticky waves in her lower abdomen. The child, the last thread connecting her to Damon, snapped, together with the blood, that naive girl who believed in love. Family and happily ever after was leaving her. Only a ringing, icy void remained. When the fog of pain cleared, a little Nia, staggering, crawled to a cloudy shard of mirror leaning against the wall. She looked into it and froze. Looking back at her was not the heiress of a cosmetic empire, not Black Barbie. Looking back at her was a monster, a map of violence carved on flesh. She opened her mouth to let out a scream of horror, to shatter this mirror with her grief, but only a stifled, wheezing rasp escaped her damaged throat. There was no sound, only the silent agony of a beast realizing its deformity. 3 months passed like one long gray day. The woman Elijah called Jane learned to live again. Her body, covered in scars, grew stronger. She chopped wood, carried water, and her hands grew calloused from work. She wore an old flannel lumberjack shirt, 3 sizes too big, and rough boots. But there was something about her that did not fit with this forest backwoods. The way she sat at the roughly hewn table with a perfectly straight back, as if at a governor reception. The way she extended her pinky holding a dented tin mug of herbal tea. These were manners of the black bourgeoisie sewn into the subcortex reflexes of high society that cannot be knocked out even with a shovel blow. Her hands were in calluses and dirt, but her fingers remembered the weight of diamonds which were no longer on them. She did not remember her name. Inside her head was a white veil, quiet and safe, until this morning Elijah returned from a rare trip to town. He silently placed a fresh newspaper on the table. "Found this," he grunted, averting his eyes. "Thought maybe you would recognize someone." Jane indifferently slid her gaze over the front page. The headline screamed in bold type, "Tragic Death of Heiress. Wife Assumes Ownership." Beneath it was a photo, a beautiful dark-skinned woman in a flawless suit, with the cold eyes of a predator holding the arm of another. Bright with a predatory smile, Jane whirled, tilted. The cup fell from her graceful fingers, hitting the floor with a crash. The white veil in her head tore with a crack, releasing the demons of the past. The face in the photograph hit her harder than the shovel 3 months ago. Damon. The name flashed in her consciousness like a neon sign, blinding. A lump of bile rose to her throat. Jane, no. Nia doubled over, gasping for air, as if she were being buried again. A cannonade of memories exploded in her head. The crunch of the blow, the taste of wet earth, Keisha, hysterical laughter. Business is business. She remembered everything, every lie, every touch that was a betrayal. She remembered the child they killed. The trembling that seized her body was not fear. It was ancestral rage, the ancient primal anger of generations of women who were used, broken, and discarded, but who always rose inside Nia. Something clicked and died forever. That soft girl in love, dreaming of a family, burned in this fire. Love did not die. It transformed, leaving behind the ash of pure, concentrated hatred. She straightened up. Her disfigured face no longer expressed confusion. In eyes that a second ago were empty now, burned the icy fire of the underworld. She ran a finger over the glossy face of her murderer. The voice was like the grinding of stones. The chords had not yet healed, but she forced them to work. My money. Elijah, watching her from the corner, felt a chill run down his back. Before him was no longer a victim. Before him stood an avenger. The night was an ally. Nia, like a shadow, slipped through the backyard of her parents' mansion, which now belonged to her murderers. She knew every creak of the floorboards here, every blind spot of the cameras. Her goal was the old cache in the basement, a safe behind a false panel that Damon never knew about. Insurance for a rainy day, as father used to say. The rainy day had come. With trembling hands, she entered the code. Click inside lay stacks of cash documents for offshore accounts and a velvet pouch with clean diamonds. Resources for war leaving. She could not resist and looked into the living room window. What she saw caused a fit of cold contempt. The elegant minimalism she had created for years was destroyed. Everywhere, gold leopard prints, tasteless luxury. On the sofa sat Keisha, sipping champagne. Hanging on her neck was Nia, grandmother, family necklace, exquisite platinum with sapphires. But on Keisha it looked vulgar, like cheap costume jewelry from a sale. This was ghetto, fabulous style in its worst manifestation. They wore her clothes, lived in her house, slept in her bed, but looked like children playing parents whom they killed. They stole her life, but could not steal her class. Nia touched her disfigured face. She needed a new mask, a mask that would be more beautiful and dangerous than the previous one. She knew where to fly: Switzerland. There they make faces that do not ask questions. In the restroom of the business lounge at Hartsfield, Jackson International Airport, it was quiet and sterilely cold. A woman in a thick black veil and huge glasses stood before the mirror, locking the door. She took out scissors, her hair thick, natural curls that Nia was so proud of. that Damon loved to wind around her finger, whispering foul. See, promises now seemed like dead weight to her. Snip. The first lock fell into the snow-white sink, a black snake on porcelain snip. The second, this was not just a haircut. In the culture of black women, this was a sacred ritual. The big chop, but not for the sake of hair health or style, but for the sake of mourning. She cut off her softness. She cut off her naivety. She shaved her head almost bald, leaving only a stiff fuzz. Goodbye, Nia. An hour earlier, she had left Elijah a sports bag stuffed with cash on the porch of his cabin. She did not say thank you, she said wait. She would return not as a beaten dog, but as the mistress of the forest. Boarding for the flight to Zurich was announced. She adjusted the veil hiding the scars that would soon disappear under the knife of the best surgeon in Europe, to give way to something new, something that knows no pity. She was flying not to heal. She was flying to be forged like steel. The turbines roared, pressing her into the leather seat of first class. The earth went down, Atlanta turned into a scattering of lights. Nia died in that dirty pit 3 months ago, choking on earth. Vesper sat in the plane. 3 years later, 3 years compressed into an endless cycle of pain and whiteness. The Swiss clinic smelled not of forest and rot, but of expensive medicines in cold steel. It was a place where money bought not health, but a new destiny. Are you sure, mademoiselle, the doctor asked, marking her disfigured skin with a marker. We can restore your former softness, make you sweet. No, her voice was firm, devoid of emotion. I do not want to be sweet, leave my roots, my nose, my lips, but make them a weapon. Remove everything that evokes pity. I want a face that forces people to lower their eyes. She asked the surgeon to cut all the softness out of her face, leaving only angles one could cut oneself on, cheekbones sharp as a razor, a gaze cold and piercing. The day to remove the bandages arrived. The nurse slowly unwound layers of gauze. Air touched the new skin. She opened her eyes and looked in the mirror. Nia had disappeared without a trace. A stranger looked back at her, stunningly beautiful but frightening. It was high femme. Beauty, expensive, inaccessible, commanding, a predator of the highest order. How should I call you in the documents? The doctor asked, quietly amazed by his work. She smiled, and from that smile the room became colder. Vesper, she answered. The evening star, the last thing seen before the onset of darkness. London, Zurich, Dubai. Vesper moved through the world like a ghost in cashmere and silk. Business lounges became her home. Stock market reports her Bible. She learned not just to earn, she learned to rule. She hired the best etiquette and speech coaches, purging herself of any remnants of a Southern accent or slang. Now her English sounded like crystal flawless, cold aristocratic old money. While her capital grew exponentially, she watched with delight the slow rotting of the empire Nia had built. Through shell companies and insiders, Vesper received reports. Damon played big boss, but without Nia's strategic mind, she was just a child with an unlimited credit card. The reports were speckled with red. Huge sums went not to development, but to Keisha, whims, villas, yachts, senseless brand name clothes. Damon tried to buy love and loyalty, but bought only her own grave. On a Monday morning, sitting in a cafe overlooking Lake Geneva, Vesper received a notification on her tablet. D&K Cosmetics announces debt restructuring, bankruptcy inevitable without external investment. Vesper took a sip of espresso. The taste was bitter and perfect. She smiled at her reflection in the dark screen. Revenge is a dish served not just cold, but with an exquisite garnish of total financial collapse. Time to go home. The private Gulfstream touched the runway of Peachtree DeKalb Airport, softly like a kiss. Atlanta met Vesper with humid heat, the smell of pines and hot asphalt, the city of black elites, the city of money music and sins. The ramp lowered and Vesper stepped onto Native So. She was wearing a dazzling white trouser suit of complex cut. In some cultures, white is the color of mourning. For her, it was the color of a clean page on which she would write her sentence. The white fabric created a stunning contrast with her deep dark skin, turning her into a living statue, into a deity of retribution. A man was already sitting in the waiting limousine, a private investigator, the best in the state for digital espionage. Dash cam, she said instead of a greeting, not taking off her dark glasses. I need the cloud. I need the recording of that night. Price does not matter. The man nodded, not daring to look her in the eyes. Energy of such power emanated from this woman that the cabin seemed cramped. Vesper took out her phone. Her fingers with a flawless manicure dialed the number of the D&K Cosmetics reception. Connect me with the CEO. Tell them Vesper Capital is interested in saving your sinking boat. She returned to the city that killed her, not to cry on a grave. She returned to collect a debt. With interest, the office that once belonged to Nia's father had changed. It was cluttered with papers, food boxes, and smelled of stress. Behind the massive oak table sat Damon. She still wore expensive suits, but the gloss was gone. Shadows lay under her eyes, shoulders slumped. She looked not like the king of the castle, but like a tired captain of a sinking ship. The door opened and Vesper entered. The pressure in the room seemed to change. Her beauty was aggressive, blinding. She did not walk, she floated, filling the space with herself. Damon involuntarily straightened up, adjusting her tie instinctively, trying to switch on her habitual stud charisma, but hit an icy wall. Miss Vesper, Damon's voice trembled. To business, Vesper sat opposite, not waiting for an invitation. She placed a folder on the table. I am buying out 51% of shares. I am paying off your debts. But management passes to me completely. Damon tried to object, tried to dominate as she was used to, but Vesper smashed her argument, Tatias with dry figures and cold intellect. She backed Damon into a corner in 5 minutes. Vesper gripped the expensive fountain pen so that her knuckles turned white, holding back the desire to plunge it into Damon's eye. But a light social half-smile played on her lips. At some moment, Damon fell silent, peering into the guest's face. You have very familiar eyes, she whispered, frowning. Have we not met before? I am often told that Vesper answered softly, not blinking. Damon looked at her with greedy interest, mixed with anxiety, not understanding that she was looking not at a savior, but at her own death. The VIP box of the club pulsed with bass and the smell of hookah. The party in honor of saving the company was in full swing. Damon did not take her eyes off Vesper, who sat with a glass of champagne like a queen in exile. Keisha noticed this. She burst into their space, wrapped her arms around Damon's neck, and demonstratively kissed her, looking straight at Vesper. It was a pathetic attempt to mark territory. Keisha was wearing a dress too short, too shiny, which screamed, "Look at me, so you are our new guardian angel," Keisha drawled. "Chewing gum. Hope you understand. Damon is taken. We are getting married soon." Vesper slowly looked her up and down. It was a look that stripped skin. "Oh, I see," Vesper purred in a voice full of poison wrapped in silk. "The dress bold, very 2010 spirit, and these shoes nice that you try to wear Louboutin, even if the arch does not fit you." Keisha flushed. This was a master class in reading humiliation without a single rude word. "What did you say?" she hissed. "I said money does not buy taste." Darling, Vesper smiled. "You try so hard to be the mistress, but you still smell of the supporting role." Keisha jerked, hitting Vesper glass with her elbow. Dark red wine splashed onto the bride. Snow-white dress spreading in an ugly stain, looking like a fresh wound. "Oops," Vesper threw out indifferently. Seems like karma. Dinner at the mansion passed in tense silence, broken only by the clinking of cutlery. Vesper was the perfect guest, but every move she made was a calculated strike. While Keisha was hysterical in the kitchen because of the ruined dress, Vesper slipped into the living room. She adjusted a photo frame, moving it exactly to the angle Nia liked. She secretly placed a book on the coffee table, open to Nia's favorite page. And before leaving the bathroom, she sprayed a tiny cloud of perfume in the air, a rare discontinued aroma of jasmine and sandalwood. Nia scent. When Damon entered the room, she froze. Her nostrils flared. She turned pale, looking around as if she had seen a ghost. "Do you smell that?" she whispered. "What exactly?" Vesper asked, innocently sipping wine. At that moment, Damon knew Doberman. Zeus ran into the room. The dog who usually growled at Keisha and let no one near him suddenly whined. He walked up to Vesper, buried his wet nose in her palm, and lay at her feet, loyally wagging his tail. Keisha, returning from the kitchen, froze with her mouth open. What the hell? He hates strangers. Vesper slowly stroked the dog on the head, looking straight into Damon's eyes. Animals sense good people, she said softly. The house recognized its mistress, filled with her scent and her energy. Even if her wife was too blind and scared to see the truth standing right in front of her, the office plunged into twilight. The city outside the window turned into a shimmering backdrop. Vesper and Damon were left alone. The air between them was thick, electrified. Vesper knew which buttons to push. She tilted her head slightly, lowered her voice, adding that very soft, vulnerable note that always made Damon lose her head. You look tense, Vesper whispered, touching Damon's hand. This touch burned her fingers with disgust, but she did not show it. Damon exhaled, leaning forward. Hunger could be read in her eyes. You have no idea, Keisha. She suffocates me. She is not like Damon cut herself off, but Vesper knew the continuation. Not like Nia. She just wants my money. She is vulgar. I am tired of her. Vesper nodded, sympathetic. Ally secretly checking the voice recorder in her jacket pocket. Poor thing, you need someone who understands you, someone of your level. Damon covered Vesper's hand with hers. Maybe we could. She began, leaning in for a kiss. Vesper softly but decisively pulled away, leaving Damon in a state of unsatisfied desire. First, deal with your obligations, she whispered. The wedding is just a formality, baby. A business deal to shut her up, Damon said quickly. Come be my guest of honor. You will see she means nothing to me. Damon thought she was leading the game, that she was again the alpha male conquering a new trophy, but she was just a fat, self-satisfied fly, hopelessly entangled in the silk web. Vesper had been weaving for 3 years. In the elite spa salon, meditative music played. It smelled of lemongrass and eucalyptus. Keisha lay on the massage table, trying to relax, but her phone vibrated nonstop. She grabbed it irritably, a message from an unknown number. Your future wife is very busy before the wedding. Keisha opened the attachment photos. Damon leaving a hotel with some model, Damon kissing another woman in a club, and an audio recording. Damon voice clear and recognizable. The wedding is just a formality. Keisha is vulgar. I am tired of her. The phone fell from Keisha's hands onto the tiled floor. Blood drained from her face. This was not just jealousy. This was animal fear. She knew what Damon was capable of. They buried Nia together for money. If Damon was tired of her, what stops her from burying Keisha? Too bitch, she hissed, jumping up. The robe slipped from her shoulder. In the mirror reflected the face of a cornered rat. Trust between thieves and murderers' lives exactly until the first stolen dollar or first betrayal. And this credit of trust had just run out. Keisha began to dress feverishly. She needed to secure her status. She needed a ring on her finger and a signature on the prenup. Urgently, while she was still alive. The wedding will be this week, she muttered under her breath, running out of the ASA. Lana will get my money even if I have to drag her to the altar by the throat. In the dark office of the penthouse, the only source of light was the monitor. Vesper sat motionless like a statue while the loading bar crawled to 100%. The hacker did his job. The old cloud storage was breached. The file opened first. There was only sound, the noise of rain and heavy breathing. Then the picture jerked. Headlight beams snatched wet trees and Damon back from the darkness. Do it now. Keisha's voice cut the ears. Vesper shuddered. She saw herself, the former, Nia standing on her knees in the mud. Saw the swing, heard that very sickening crunch. Tears, hot and angry, flowed down her new perfect face. She was watching her own execution. She heard them laughing, bearing her. How they divided her money. Receipts, she whispered, wiping tears with the back of her hand. I have all the receipts. She opened the video editing program. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, cutting the juiciest, most incriminating moments. The blow, Keisha face. Damon confession. She added subtitles, amplified the sound. This was not just a clip. This was a masterpiece of destruction. When the render finished, she squeezed a small black flash drive in her hand. It was cold and heavy. In her hands was not just a flash drive, but a loaded gun held to the temple of their future. And she was going to pull the trigger in front of all Atlanta. The yacht rocked on the waves of Lake Lanier. Music boomed, champagne flowed like a river. Keisha's bachelorette party was just as vulgar as she was. Strippers, mountains of cocaine, and fake laughter. Keisha was drunk, but her eyes darted. Fear did not let her go for a second. Vesper approached her with a velvet box, a gift for the bride. She said with a smile that made Keisha's throat go dry. Keisha opened the box and turned pale. On the black velvet lay a platinum necklace with sapphires. That one Nia necklace which Keisha herself tore from her neck before Damon pawned it. Where Keisha wheezed, her hands began to shake. Found it in a vintage store. Vesper lied lightly, fastening the lock on Keisha's neck suits. You blue is the color of fidelity. The cold metal touched Keisha's skin, and she jerked as if from a burn. It seemed to her the necklace was strangling. Her alcohol and panic loosened her tongue. She pulled Vesper to herself, breathing fumes. I did bad things, Vesper. Very bad things for love, for money. I am afraid it will come back. Vesper leaned to her ear, her lips almost touching the lobe. It always comes back, darling, she whispered. Everything has to be paid for, and the bill has already been issued. Keisha recoiled, looking at Vesper with eyes wide with horror. But she had already dissolved into the crowd of dancers. Keisha wore a dead friend diamonds like a noose around her neck, and Vesper tightened this knot tighter with pleasure. Westview Cemetery was quiet and majestic. Damon stood by the marble tombstone. With Nia name under this stone was nothing, only an empty coffin they buried for show, but for the world it was a place of mourning. Damon placed a bouquet of white lilies. She lingered just long enough for the paparazzi hiding behind the trees, whom she summoned herself to take successful shots of the inconsolable widow. She adjusted her lapel, brushed away a non-existent tear. It was a perfect performance, hypocrisy of the highest grade. Vesper watched this spectacle from the tinted window of her Bentley parked at the gates. Her face was impenetrable, but her fingers gripped the steering wheel to whiteness. When Damon, satisfied with herself, headed for the exit, Vesper got out of the car and, remaining unnoticed, slipped to the grave. She placed one red rose in a small envelope on the cold marble. A minute later, Damon returned. She forgot her phone on the bench. She saw the rose. Frown picked up the envelope. Inside was a note written in handwriting she would recognize out of 1,000 Nia handwriting. Just 2 words: I am coming. Blood drained from Damon's face. She turned sharply, looking around like a ornered beast. The wind rustled the foliage, and it seemed to her she heard Nia whisper. She brought flowers to an empty pit to buy herself public forgiveness, not knowing that the one she buried was already standing behind her back with a shovel. The morning of the wedding of the year in Atlanta was sunny and flawless. At the Swan House, estate work was boiling. Florists were arranging thousands of white roses. Waiters were polishing crystal. Everyone was preparing for a celebration of love in her penthouse. Vesper prepared for war. She stood before the mirror. She was not wearing white as requested in the invitation. She was wearing a dress the color of clotted blood, deep saturated red, the color of Oya, the Orisha of windstorms and change, the color that screamed danger. The fabric hugged her body like a second skin, emphasizing every curve, every muscle ready for attack. She inserted the flash drive into a small portable transmitter that was synchronized with the projector at the wedding. A green light blinked. Connection established. Then she dialed a number. Detective, are you in position? Yes, ma'am. We await your signal. Perimeter secured. Vesper hung up. She applied the last detail, burgundy lipstick. Her reflection in the mirror smiled at her. It was not a smile of happiness. It was the baring of teeth of a wolf seeing the open throat of prey. She took a clutch. Today she is not a guest. Today she is not an investor. Today she is judge, jury, and executioner in a couture dress, and the sentence has already been passed. The estate garden drowned in white roses. The air trembled with the aroma of flowers and expensive perfume. All the elite of Atlanta gathered here. Politicians, rappers, businessmen. It was a black wedding in all its splendor. Gold silk, wide-brimmed hats, and flawless smiles. At the altar stood Damon in a Tom Ford tuxedo, She would look like a king if not for the beads of sweat on her forehead and shifting gaze. She nervously fiddled with her cuff, scanning the crowd. When the organ began to play and Keisha appeared at the start of the aisle, the gospel choir burst into "The One He Kept for Me." Powerful voices soared to the sky, singing of divine love, creating a creepy, sickening contrast with the rotten essence of this union. Keisha walked to the altar, smiling tightly, but her hands shook, clutching the bouquet so hard stems broke. She searched for Damon eyes, seeking support, but found only cold. Vesper sat in the first row, the only red spot in a sea of pastel tones. She sat straight, legs crossed, and smiled. It was the smile of a predator watching an antelope go to the watering hole, where it is already awaited. The music died down. The priest cleared his throat. If anyone knows a reason why these two cannot be joined in lawful marriage, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. Silence hung over the garden. The air was thick with the aroma of roses and lies, and Vesper inhaled it with pleasure. Before lighting the match, the click of Vesper heels on the marble path sounded like a gunshot. She stood up slowly, gracefully, as if walking onto a stage for an Oscar. The red dress flared in the sun, all heads turned to her. I know the reason, she pronounced. Her voice did not tremble. It was calm, low and clear. It cut the silence like a scalpel opens an abscess. The groom is a murderer. The bride is an accomplice. And the reason is greed. A gasp swept through the garden. Hundreds of eyes widened. Hands reached for phones. Live streams on Instagram started instantly. The tea is hot was read in every look. The scandal was tastier than champagne. Damon laughed. It was a nervous, barking laugh. Are you drunk, Vesper? She shouted, trying to save face, but her voice broke. Security, remove her. She is delirious. Keisha froze. Her face turned the color of her white dress. She knew she felt the noose. Vesper did not move from her spot. She looked straight into Damon's eyes. Delirium. She asked again with a slight smirk. Let us ask the witnesses. She raised her hand and snapped her fingers, signaling the TE. Schneeschen. Turn on the screen. Huge LED panels behind the altar, intended for the love story slideshow, blinked and went out, only to illuminate the garden a second later with the light of a very different story. The screen flashed with a grainy image of a night forest. Through powerful concert speakers tuned to maximum volume, the noise of rain spread, and then a voice everyone knew. Do it now. Keisha's shriek made the guests flinch. On the screen in the headlights, Damon swung the shovel. The sound of the impact, a dull, wet crunch of bone, hit the ears of those present with a physical wave. Sorry, baby girl, but business is business. Damon's voice was clear, cold, murderous. Then laughter and words. We are rich, bury her faster. The garden filled with a collective gasp of horror, the gasp which seemed to suck out all the oxygen. Nia, elderly mother sitting in the second row, clutched her heart, and with a dull moan slumped onto the grass. Her scream. My girl drowned in the noise of the video. Damon staggered as if punched in the gut. Her skin took on an ashen gray shade. She looked at the screen at her, crime magnified 100 times, and could not breathe. Keisha, squealing like a wounded animal, threw the bouquet and bolted away from the altar, stumbling in her puffy dress. The video ended with a freeze frame, a bloody hand sticking out of the earth. Silence followed, deafening. Vesper slowly turned to the crowd, to Damon, to the phone cameras. Did you like it? She asked in an icy tone. The truth thundered from the speakers, and every word was a nail driven into the lid of their coffin before the eyes of the whole world. Chaos grew, but for Damon, the world narrowed to one point. To the woman in red, she looked into Vesper's eyes and saw not a stranger there. She saw that very gaze she loved. Betrayed, killed Nia. Damon's lips moved soundlessly. It is impossible, you are dead. Vesper walked up to her close. She violated personal space, entering the zone of intimacy, which was now the zone of death. Damon smelled of Swea, an animal fear breaking through expensive cologne. Vesper leaned to her, and her face softened for a moment, returning that very forgotten tenderness. Hello, Daddy, she whispered in her real soft voice, which Damon had heard thousands of times in their bedroom. You buried me poorly. She pronounced this affectionate sexual nickname as if she plunged a serrated knife under a rib and twisted it. Damon's face distorted in a grimace of madness. Reality cracked. You, she roared, throwing herself at Vesper, with fists trying to destroy this risen nightmare. But she was too late. 3 guards hired by Vesper knocked her off her feet. Damon crashed face down into white rose petals now crushed and dirty. She growled, pinned to the ground, looking up at the woman who towered over her like a goddess of vengeance. Keisha ran. She knocked over waiters, overturned trays of champagne tangling in the hem of her luxurious Vera Wang dress. She burst into the catering kitchen trying to find the back exit, but they were already waiting for her there. 2 police officers blocked the way. No, no, it is not me, she squealed when they grabbed her arms. It is all Damon. She forced me. I am a victim. They dragged her back into the garden right to Vesper feet. Keisha collapsed on her knees. Mascara flowed down her face in black streams, turning her into a grotesque mask. She crawled to Vesper, trying to grab the hem of her red dress. Nia, friend, sister. Forgive me, I did not mean to. Please tell them we are family. Vesper stepped back a pace, squeamishly pulling away the fabric as if Keisha were contagious. She looked at the woman with whom she shared secrets, dreams and clothes, at the woman who laughed burying her family. Vesper asked again in an icy tone, You sold me for a Birkin bag and someone else's husband. You died to me in that pit. Keisha, the officer clicked handcuffs on the bride wrists. The click of metal sounded like a final period in their friendship. Keisha howled, crawled at her feet in her ruined designer dress. But Vesper saw before her only dirt that needed to be washed away. The wail of police sirens drowned out the singing of birds. Red and blue lights reflected in thousands of white roses, turning the garden into a surreal disco. Guests recovering from shock turned into greedy spectators. Hundreds of phones rose into the air, broadcasting the fall of an empire on Instagram. Live and TikTok, #wedding. From Hell was already trending. Damon was lifted from the ground. Her expensive tuxedo was in mud and grass. Hair disheveled, the stud who always carried herself with royal dignity now looked pathetic. Officers twisted her arms behind her back. It is a montage, she yelled into phone cameras, trying to shout over the crowd. It is a deep fake. This bitch is an imposter. I do not know her, but no one listened. In the eyes of the crowd, there was no longer respect, only a thirst for spectacle. The king was naked and the king was a murderer. Vesper stood in the center of this chaos, absolutely motionless, like a rock in a storm. Her red dress fluttered in the wind. She did not smile. She did not cry. She just watched. When Damon was led to the patrol car, she turned around. Their gazes met for the last time. In Damon's eyes, there was no longer fear. There was pure, concentrated hatred mixed with twisted admiration. She understood who destroyed her. She understood she lost to a worthy opponent. The door slammed. The queen stood motionless, watching the cardboard castle of her enemies collapse, and felt only fatigue. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and despair. Damon sat at a metal table, handcuffed to a bracket in the floor. An orange robe hung on her, like a sack, stripping her of remnants of former gloss. When Vesper entered, Damon jerked forward, Nia, baby. She began to whisper, trying to switch on her charm, which no longer worked. Listen to me. I still love you, Keisha. Forced me. We can fix everything. We have money. Vesper laughed. It was a dry, joyless sound. She sat opposite and threw a folder on the table. We do not have money, Damon. I have money and you have a life sentence. She opened the folder. These are divorce papers, and this is the transfer of all company assets to me as the main creditor. You are bankrupt. Your accounts are frozen. Your car's confiscated. Even your lawyer refused the case when he saw the video. Damon turned pale. You will not leave me with nothing. Vesper leaned to the glass separating their worlds. I will leave you exactly as much as you left me in that pit. Nothing rot in prison, darling. I will make sure you do not have a cent even for cigarettes. She stood up and headed for the exit. Your love cost me my life, she threw over her shoulder. My divorce will cost you everything. The D&K Cosmetics office was flooded with sunlight. Vesper walked to the wall where a huge portrait of Damon in the Mistress of Life pose hung with cold calm. She took it down and threw it into the corner, where a pile of junk from the past life already lay. The glass cracked below at the entrance to the building. Reporters were already waiting. Vesper walked out to them, not as an avenger in red, but as a business lady in a strict suit. "My name is Nia," she said into the microphones, "and I return to take what belongs to me." Headlines the next day screamed, "Resurrected Queen, Miracle of Atlanta." But Vesper did not care. She signed documents creating a foundation to help women survivors of domestic violence. She was turning her pain into a shield for others. In the evening, sorting through Damon, personal safe in the office, she stumbled upon a small box. Her heart skipped a beat. Inside lay that very plastic pregnancy test, yellowed, cracked. Damon kept it, not as a memory of the lost child, but as a trophy, as proof that she could kill not only her wife, but the future. Vesper squeezed the test in her hand until it hurt. Tears, which she did not allow herself in public, flowed down her cheeks. She erased their names from the walls, returned her money and her company, but the scars on her heart reminded that victory D. "Oh, it's not heel pain, it just makes it quieter." A matte black G-Wagon looked alien on the washed-out forest road, but the woman who stepped out of it fit the landscape perfectly. Vesper changed designer suits for simple jeans and a flannel shirt. She returned to where it all began. Elijah sat on the porch of his cabin, carving a figure out of wood. He was not surprised to see her. He knew she would return. "Hello, old man," she said quietly. "Hello, child." He put down the knife. She handed him a folder. "These are documents for the land. All this forest is now yours. No one will cut it down. No one will chase you away. This is your kingdom." Then she opened the back door of the car. A clumsy Rottweiler puppy rolled out. "And this is so you will not be lonely. Brutus would be glad for a successor." Elijah took the puppy in his arms. The old man smiled and the wrinkles around his eyes became deeper. He looked at Vesper, at her new, sharp, expensive face. "You change," he said. "The face is different, but the eyes are the same. Do not lose them again." Vesper felt the lump in her throat melt. In this forest, she lost her life, was betrayed and killed. But right here in this cabin, amidst the smell of herbs and smoke, she found her soul. And now she knew what to do with it. Fulton County Jail smelled of bleach and hopelessness. Sounds here were harsh, clanging iron, shuffling feet, screams. In the special regime block, in adjacent solitary cells, sat two women who once shared dreams of millions. "It is all your fault," Keisha's voice broke into a squeal. She clutched the bars, her face gray without makeup, hair tangled. "If you had hit harder, we would be drinking mojitos in the Bahamas now." "Shut up," Damon growled from the next cell. She sat on the bunk, clutching her head with her hands. "You are the greedy bitch. Do it faster. I want her money. That is your voice on the recording. Idiot." They screamed at each other for hours, days, weeks. Their hatred became their only food, their only entertainment. They accused, cursed, recalled every detail. Their union turned into torture. A guard passing by only shook his head. He had seen many criminals, but these two, they devoured each other alive. The judge gave them life, but the real hell they created for themselves. They were locked together in a cramped, stifling cage of their hatred, and this was scarier than any sentence the court could pass. Evening descended on Atlanta, painting the sky in purple tones. In the silence of her penthouse, Vesper stood before the mirror in the bathroom. Water rushed, washing away the day. She took a cotton pad and slowly wiped off the expensive lipstick, foundation, mascara. Layer by layer, the flawless mask, Vesper disappeared. Skin remained, thin, barely visible. White lines of scars were still there, if you look closely, before she hated them, before she saw in them ugliness and a memory of pain. Today she touched them with her fingertips with tenderness. This was not a map of defeat. This was a map of survival. Every scar said, "They tried to kill me, but I am still here." She was no longer naive, Nia nor icy Vesper. She was someone third whole, wounded healer, a healer who knows the price of wounds. The mirror no longer showed a monster. It showed a woman who walked through hellfire and did not burn but tempered. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the doorbell. Vesper froze. She was not expecting anyone. Maybe it is just a delivery. Or maybe it is that cute architect she met at the charity evening who looked at her not as a bag of money, but as a person. Vesper smiled at her reflection sincerely for the first time in 3 years and went to open the ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel, drowned in golden light and the aroma of thousands of orchids. It was the triumph of the Phoenix Foundation, and Vesper was its crowned queen. Sharks of business politics and hip-hop stars circled around her, trying to catch her eye, get at least a drop of her attention. But she was unreachable, towering above them like an inaccessible peak. Vesper stepped into the shadow of a marble column holding a glass of vintage Dom Perignon by the thin stem. She raised her hand, admiring the play of light. On the ring finger of her right hand burned with cold fire a massive yellow canary diamond, a ring worthy of an empress, a ring she bought for herself. Before being Nia, she believed she needed a stud, a strong protector in a flawless suit, a daddy to feel complete and protected. She sought support in another person. What a stupid, fatal mistake. The support was always inside. She no longer needed a second half to be whole. She herself became a whole universe, indestructible and shining. Sounds of jazz and laughter began to recede, fading into the background, turning into white noise. Vesper slowly turned her head. Her gaze pierced the space and rested straight on the camera lens, breaking the fourth wall. She looked straight into the soul of everyone who had ever been betrayed, who lay in their metaphorical grave. In her eyes, there was no pain, only absolute frightening power. She slightly raised her glass in a silent toast and spoke in a velvet voice that held steel. Remember, girls, never let them see you bleed. Make them bleed instead of you. Blackout.